So there's this thing called nature versus nurture. It was like an old adage. It's like you hear it in movies. It is an analogy. This can be depicted on various subjects, man. But the main thing right now that I want to talk about it is in like context to. I really want to talk about in context to like me and my friends, artists and BTB and other artists that we're affiliated with, and also just in general. Not only I'm talking about like performance art, just visual arts, musical arts, those kind of things. So what it is that I mean, there's a really staple thing about it that it is fortunate and unfortunate. So at least for artists, some artists are luckier because they're predisposed to a better environment. I gotta really talk about that because that's really serious, man. Because that's such a serious thing for artists as far as they're concerned, especially when you're growing up as a child and your teenagers and so forth. If you're not exposed to a good environment where you can cultivate your art, you're screwed. I mean, or it's really difficult. And so I want to give a couple examples of it personally. I'm not including myself and including some of my friends and that kind of thing. So, well, first of all, I want to bring a really brief. There's kind of a rule for artists, and it's kind of it's invisible. It's like what I call it the invisible rule. But what it is that if you're put in a space where you have the time, or should I say, you have the luxury to develop your arts, then that's where you have that self cultivation, where that artwork gets cultivated, and then you're really lucky if you have a mentor that helps you through that. But that's a whole nother subject. What I'm talking about here is just the actual environment, and Chicago. I'm sure the same situations occur all over the world for artists that are poor, that are impoverished. So one of the things we got to bring up right away is taking notice that when you see an artist that's famous, that there's a famous artist and that famous artist is known, it doesn't even really matter even what kind of art they do. 90% of those artists, like 90% out of 100, they had a background where they were well off. Okay, so most of them were not poor. Not saying that there's good artists that grew up poor. They are, but that's where their talent shine through, and there was a lot of hardships to go through. But mostly, and I mean even through history, I mean you look at Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and Shakespeare, everybody, all kind of artists throughout history, and you'll find out that if you look in their background, they had a relatively well-to-do background. In other words, they were not struggling to survive. See, this is what I'm talking about, because that survival mode, if you're stuck in survival mode, you're not going to be able to cultivate your art as you're growing up, or it's going to be very difficult. So what does that have to do with like the stark reality of art and artistic success? Well, it has a lot to do with it, man, because if you're stuck in survival mode, where you're just working from paycheck to paycheck and you grow up in a poor environment, first of all, you're not going to get um, support for your art. That's like the thing. Um, Me and my friends did not get support for our art, and it's not that we had bad parents. It wasn't about that. What it was about was that they were struggling to make ends meet, and getting a job, like working a factory job. Like if you're working a factory job, I don't know, making sweetheart cups or whatever the heck, or packaging or just doing factory work at a dock. They would consider that success, not cultivating your children's artistic endeavors, because they don't see that as something that's going to bring in money. Okay, so that's really bar none. Gee whiz, that's like 99. That's almost 100%. So you got poor people, poor parents. They're not going to support their kids' art. That because they're locked in survival mode. So it's psychology, man. And my parents, they didn't recognize any. I'm not a very good artist, number one, but when I'm compelled to do art, they didn't recognize my yeah. I'm not even gonna get into that, man. So I mean, I think my mother once said like one or two comments. Just if I drew something particularly well, she said something about it. But it no way, no support. So what about my friends? Well, let's look at Sal and you know Menace and stuff. You're looking at at the same map, psychological map. No support, man. Gee, I mean nothing. you know so we get a lot of that's stupid, or why are you doing that, that's stupid, that's really stupid, you're wasting your time doing that. See, the problem with this is that when you're a true artist, you're compelled to do artwork. You're compelled, you just you gotta get it, man. You can't really help yourself, but you're gonna do some kind of art. I had a stroke last year, and I couldn't do a lot of art for a long time. I thank God that I am able to do some of it. Amen, Jack. But the thing is that even when I couldn't do anything, I was always trying to do artsy stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's truly, oh my gosh, it's truly a compulsion. When you're an artist, you're out there expressing yourself some type of way. Um, you can't help it. Um, Now, when you look at poor people, um, I'm not getting misty on you, man. When you look at poor people and the artists, you're looking at you're looking at obstacles. I'm serious freaking obstacles. First of all, you got parents that don't give a shit about your about your artistic endeavors or what your goals are. When you're an artist yourself, you can't even see the horizon, the goal line. I went to school. I went to McCormick School, and then I went to Canoon. They were a little bit more pervasive in Canoon, a little bit. And then I went to Farragut, which is during the apocalyptic age, which is right after the big fire of Farragut, and a lot of race riots, a lot of gang banger. We used to drink. Me, Sal, Lollipop Louie, my brother Papa, we used to be drinking in the cafeterias. I'm going to give you an idea of how kind of a surrealistic environment living in, going to that school was. They bashed in the principal's head. They raped a girl in the library upstairs, a teacher in the library upstairs. So this is all during the time that I was in Farragut. So it was very kind of an apocalyptic high school. Um, yeah, not good for learning. We had teachers, Miss Ross and all that. This is another thing. They had teachers that, by all means, don't take me being judgmental at this, who knew art history, which is good to know art history. You gotta know your art history, right? But the thing is that they were not talented. They were not artists themselves. In other words, they could not draw a human figure. I'm not shitting you. I wouldn't say it if I wasn't telling you the truth. And I think that if you're going to be teaching art, at least from my standpoint, you should at least be able to be at least have some artistic prowess and show that you can actually draw. That would be me like a hiring a coach who knows nothing about baseball or football or anything. It doesn't make sense. You know. So yeah. The environment, going back to the environment, I'm trying to paint the picture of what I'm talking about, and I know a lot of people will chime in if they see this, because little village, La Villita, it sounds like a sweet name, don't it? Oh, the little village, little village. I thought you think you're gonna see some freaking elves walk around and rock around that shit. No, not filled with elves, filled with nihilistic game bangers. A lot of game bangers with very conducive to existential thoughts. They're only living for the now. They have no plan or future or idea of the future, what the future would bring as far as positivity is concerned. They're talking about, whatever they could get away with, they get away with it. You know what I mean? And that's the version of the survival mode that I'm talking about, because there's various, variations on that survival mode. Our parents get stuck in survival mode. And if you're an artist and growing up as a kid in survival mode, there's nothing there. I mean, there's nothing there to actually support your art. Um, when I turned a graffiti artist, and I got support from other artists that were graffiti artists. Yeah. So there was a real strong contingent in BTB where we supported each other as a brotherhood. So that I'm still doing. I'm 51 years old, man. And I'm still doing the creation of pillars, psychological pillars and support systems for BTB, really on the premise of what I'm talking about here, is that our art really makes and kind of just cultivate your life. It helps you to go on and move on to other careers, and some of those things don't seem related, but they are. Just the social aspect of it is extremely um, paramount, very important, Doc. So you're coming from an environment where you're poor. Yeah, I go and see, like, you look at me and Menace and everything. So what are we doing in 1980s, early 80s, or jumping the hopping the train line, jumping on a train with no money. Being all the way on a far south side or far north side with no money because we're poor, or very little bit of money. Sometimes, jumping on a super transfer and going around the city and all that, and then meeting other artists that are poor like us, and then we recognize that we're poor, And so what we do is we get together and then we start trying to find some kind of outlet. So graffiti was fundamental, to say the least, for being the only proponent from us being able to express ourselves in art. A lot of it was illegal, but then you don't blame a person for turning to illegal art when when the structure that's supposed to be supportive to your art doesn't exist. Okay, so in other words, if it doesn't exist, no support structure, dude, duh. Why if you're compelled to do artwork in the support structure that you should have around art isn't there, well, by all means, you go around where it is, and that's where the graffiti art came into place. Uh, you know, um, and that's a story of BTB, monumentally, fundamentally poor. Just going around riding trains and meeting other poor artists, and then getting around and doing walls and all this other stuff. I was always interested in oil paints and all that when I was a kid. I remember just simply not being able to get them because I was too poor, you know. And it kind of harkens back to, like, every artist that you see that's successful in history. When you trace that, go Google it, man. Go back and you'll find out that 90% of those artists that are famous or successful had come back, grew up in a supportive environment. In other words, they were not locked in survival mode. You know, that's how it was. Even Van Gogh. Van Gogh had a brother who supported him, and in other words, he didn't have to work constantly. He had time to go and do his art. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, you can forget it. These guys were fairly rich as far as their time was concerned, because they had come from merchant parents who had in other words, they were pretty well off. Okay, Rembrandt too. So people who know art history know what I'm talking about. And so what does that got to do with a bunch of street kids? Well, it has a lot to do with it, because it follows the same fundamental rule. When you don't have an environment or outlet, and it's all about just struggling to survive, man, struggling to survive. You're looking at me, Sal, Menace, all these guys who were out there. I remember, with Rascal and everybody else when we were out there in the 1980s. Hey, man, look at our parents. Look at how we grew up. They did the best they could just to put food on the table. So there wasn't like, hey, we're going to send you to art school or give you art lessons or anything that was going to cultivate or put you even in the direction of artistic success. It's non-existent. So any kind of success that we gained from arts, we had to earn it by ourselves, by the will of God, and very hard. I will never be. I have a lot of sicknesses. I have a strange background, genetically, and I've been sick for a long time, and I've always been sick with something or other, weird illnesses and all that, diseases and stuff like that. And as I grew older, they started becoming more and more prominent. So they stopped me from actually being successful. I'll never meet the success in my entire life. So I'm too old now to be a successful artist. I've had some success as a writer and as an artist locally. I'm actually pretty satisfied with that. But I'll never meet my potential. That's the sad part, because sickness stops me from doing that. My illnesses stop me from doing that. However, there's something that's very important, is that I realize that uh, my purpose is to let people know not only that they need to get themselves in an environment where their art can be cultivated and not being stuck in survival mode. Not only that, but they also have to learn how to do that. So in other words, what I'm trying to say, which is really good, super positive message, Doc, is that you can be poor, like we were poor, and still be successful. The only thing is, it takes a much harder effort than if somebody who's rich or well off to meet that success. You just got to play your cards right. You got to take advantage of your opportunities, and take advantage, not taking advantage of people, but taking advantage of the circumstances that are being either accidentally, or being self-promoted, or being just by pure serendipity, where you just run into these things through luck. God's given it to you through faith. These roads that will lead to your artistic success. So you don't have to have a supportive family life, or have a supportive structure, or have a teacher or a mentor to be a successful artist. All you need is the will and the compulsion. And that, you would think that would be common sense. It is not. Most people don't even know that. I've seen a lot of people. I remember being an artist and not knowing any of what I'm talking about now. I had to learn this myself. So it's just one thing that we had to touch base. And just like we usually, see Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon, right? They go, well, the Neanderthals never grew very much in technology, still with the same technology, while Cro-Magnon man, evolved further and was more culture related. Well, that's probably because Neanderthals were just stuck in survival mode for thousands of years. So they advanced slowly. While other people, they had a more enriched life and had the ability to actually cultivate the arts better, and that reflects in street kids like me, like I used to be, and the people who are watching this video. So it's just something to think about, because really, if you trace that, you can find out that it's true, Doc.